I have a question. What if every machine on Earth suddenly stopped? Imagine the world frozen in an instant, the engines silenced, the screens darkened, the hum of electricity gone, leaving behind a deafening stillness that no living human has ever known. Planes that were once carving paths through the sky would falter, their engines lifeless, falling toward the ground in terrifying silence. Trains would grind to a halt on their tracks, ships would drift aimlessly upon the sea, and the endless flow of cars on the world's roads would come to a sudden and jarring stop. In homes, the lights would flicker out, fridges would grow warm, and phones would turn into empty shells of glass and metal. No longer gateways to the vast web of communication, but cold reminders of our reliance on machines. It would be a moment of confusion, disbelief, and then fear as billions realize that life as they know it has just collapsed into an unrecognizable void. To grasp the magnitude of this scenario, we must first understand how deeply machines have intertwined themselves into our lives. The hum of a refrigerator, the whisper of a laptop fan, the roar of a subway, the hidden thrum of a power plant. These are not luxuries, but the invisible scaffolding that holds modern civilization upright. If every machine stopped at once, society would be stripped bare of its supports in a single breath. The immediate consequences would be catastrophic. Think first of the skies. Thousands of planes in flight would lose thrust and control, plunging toward Earth with passengers helpless inside. In the oceans, tankers and cargo ships would drift without power, their crews stranded in vast waters with no way to call for help. On highways, cars would freeze in place, engines stalled, leading to collisions and chaos as momentum carries them into one another before rolling into silence. Hospitals, once sanctuaries of healing, would become places of dread as life support machines shut down, ventilators ceased, and critical operations falter. The modern world would, in a single instant, be transformed into something alien and perilous. Communication would vanish. No phones, no internet, no broadcasts. The voices that link continents and carry news across oceans would fall quiet. People would be cut off from one another, reduced to the reach of their own voices and the distance their feet could carry them. Information, once flowing faster than thought, would suddenly stagnate. Panic would spread not only from the loss of contact, but from the lack of knowledge about what has happened. Imagine the darkness that falls when not only the sun sets, but when no artificial light rises to replace it. Cities once blazing beacons of human achievement would vanish into blackness, their skylines erased against the night. Stars would blaze above more vividly than ever before, but they would shine over streets silent and dangerous, over buildings that no longer pulse with energy. The sudden quiet might at first feel eerie, a haunting peace, but soon it would become terrifying as the absence of familiar sounds reveals the fragility of our world. Without machines, food would spoil in storage, water systems would stop pumping, and transportation of supplies would cease. The grocery store shelves would remain filled only for a few days before hunger takes hold. Farmers without tractors or irrigation systems would be thrust back into ancient struggles, unable to sustain the billions who now rely on them. The collapse would not be gradual but immediate, exposing how tightly modern survival is bound to the heartbeat of machines. In the cities, millions would pour into the streets seeking answers, only to find themselves surrounded by others just as lost. The police radios would be silent, the fire engines motionless, the ambulances powerless to move. Governments would falter without their networks of machines to coordinate response, their leaders as blind as the citizens they serve. Authority would fragment, replaced by confusion and fear. In rural areas where communities are smaller, survival might last longer, but even there the absence of machines would be felt in the loss of tools, electricity, and communication. The rich and poor alike would find themselves stripped of their advantages, as wealth in a machineless world offers little protection against hunger and cold. The psychological shock would be immense. Imagine a child reaching for a tablet that no longer turns on, or a worker arriving at an office where nothing functions, or an elder waiting for a medical device that no longer responds. The realization would spread slowly at first, then all at once, that the age of machines has ended, and humanity is alone again, with nothing but its own muscles and ingenuity. In the longer term, societies would fracture into smaller communities, forced to rely on pre-industrial methods of survival. Fields would be plowed by hand, rivers would become lifelines of transport once again, forests would be cut for fuel. Knowledge itself, once stored in clouds and servers, would be locked away in lifeless machines, leaving only the fragile records printed on paper to guide those who remain. Civilization would be thrust backward, but the fall would not be a return to the past, for the people of today are not prepared as those of centuries ago were. Modern humanity has forgotten how to survive without machines, and that forgetting would cost dearly. Yet even amidst the devastation, there would be glimpses of resilience. Communities would gather, neighbors would rely on each other as never before, and skills long dormant might be remembered or relearned. The world would slow, the pace of life shifting from the speed of silicon to the rhythm of the sun and seasons. The night sky, clear of artificial light, might inspire awe, even as it terrifies. Silence might bring reflection, even as it isolates. Humanity would be forced to rediscover what it means to live without the crutches it has leaned upon for centuries. Still, the question lingers of how permanent this stoppage would be. If the machines could never return, then humanity would enter a new age defined by loss and adaptation. If they could one day start again, then the interlude would serve as a brutal reminder of dependence, perhaps encouraging a wiser relationship with technology in the future. For in truth, this scenario is not only about imagining disaster, but about confronting how vulnerable we are, how deeply we have woven machines into every aspect of life, and how fragile the threads are that hold our civilization together. The thought is both terrifying and enlightening, for it forces us to consider what is essential and what we might become without the constant hum of our creations. As the dust settles in this imagined world, where every machine has stopped, humanity stands before a mirror, seeing itself without the armor of technology, vulnerable, uncertain, yet also undeniably alive. It is in that moment of stillness that the greatest question emerges. Would we crumble entirely, or would we find within ourselves the strength to rise anew? The silence of machines would not only challenge survival, but also identity. For generations, humanity has measured progress through its inventions, from the first wheel to the engine to the computer, each step celebrated as proof of advancement. To lose all machines in a single instant would feel like a stripping away of history itself, as though the ladder of progress had been kicked out from beneath our feet. People would look upon their lifeless devices with grief, not simply for the utility lost, but for the dreams they once represented. The skyline of every city would stand as a monument to what was. Towers of glass and steel that no longer glowed with energy. Their elevators frozen, their offices abandoned, their lights extinguished. The psychological weight of living among the ruins of a machine world would shape culture as powerfully as hunger and cold. Religion and philosophy would surge as people seek meaning in the collapse. Some seeing it as divine judgment, others as a chance for rebirth. Myths would quickly form, stories of the age when machines moved of their own accord, tales passed to children who might grow up, never knowing the glow of a screen or the hum of an engine. In villages lit only by fire, elders would describe the age of machines with the same wonder that ancient generations once reserved for stories of gods. Art would change too. Without digital tools or recording devices, expression would return to canvas, clay, and voice. Songs would be sung not through speakers, but through human breath. Paintings lit by flame rather than pixel. Creativity might flourish in new ways, though always with the echo of what was lost. The earth itself would feel the stoppage. For centuries, machines have scarred landscapes, drilled into the crust, mined mountains, and filled skies with smoke. In their absence, rivers would run cleaner, air would grow clearer, and forests might begin to return. Animals would move through spaces once dominated by machine noise, their calls filling the silence left behind. The world would heal even as humanity struggles, nature reclaiming spaces once thought permanently conquered. Yet healing of the Earth would not erase the scars of dependence. Nuclear plants without their cooling systems could turn dangerous, chemical factories might leak without safeguards, and cities could be poisoned by the very machines that once sustained them. The collapse would bring not only silence but chaos, as infrastructure designed to run endlessly falters without guidance. The balance between renewal and disaster would hang in every community, determined by how swiftly people could respond with nothing more than their own strength and courage. As decades pass in this imagined world, survivors would adapt. Children born after the stoppage would grow into a reality where machines are myths, and their skills would reflect a return to older traditions. Agriculture by hand, transport by horse or sail, communication by word of mouth or ink on parchment. Civilization would not vanish, but it would be transformed into something slower, more fragile, yet perhaps also more deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. Whether this is seen as tragedy or opportunity would depend on perspective, for some would mourn forever, while others might find beauty in simplicity regained. And yet, as the stars shine overhead, with no competition from city lights, one question would haunt those who remember. If machines ever stirred again, if the silence broke and the hum returned, would humanity embrace them once more, or would fear and memory hold us back? In that question lies the heart of the thought experiment, for it asks not only what we would lose if every machine stopped, but what we might learn about ourselves in their absence. For in the stillness we might discover that while machines amplify human ability, it is resilience, imagination, and cooperation that truly define survival. And as we picture the world fallen silent, we must ask ourselves one final question. Are we the masters of our machines, or have they become the masters of us? And if stripped away, would we find strength in our humanity, or despair in its weakness?